So I would like to welcome Dr. Josep Garcia from Essential Ag Solutions. Today he's going to talk about endotoxin mitigation. Dr. Joseph's and Dr. Josep Garcia will actually not be available to answer questions, but Ethan Gross will be answering questions for him. So please, again, make sure you drop your questions in the chat, and we'll have somebody answer those at the end of this presentation.
Hello, my name is Josep Garcia. I'm the Toxin Solutions Technical Support Manager for Special Nutrients and New Science. We are partners with Essential Ag Solutions, and we'd like to present you today some data we have on endotoxin control, endotoxin mitigations with one of our products, Protect 8 Plus. Just a little bit of background on endotoxins. Endotoxins, same name, it refers to LPS, lipopolysaccharides. They are an integral part of gram-negative bacterial outer cell wall. So it only comes from gram-negative bacteria, and if they're not excreted, as opposed to exotoxins, they're an integral component of the exterior cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. So they get released when this bacterial cell wall gets broken, either by the action of antibiotics or because the cell are divided, there is growth, so the cell is divided, so then of course the cell wall gets split, and that's when they get released. The main components, this will be the molecule of an endotoxin. They have three main components, an antigen portion, a core oligosaccharide portion, and a lipid, what it's called a lipid A portion. The lipid A portion, it's actually the portion of the molecule, the component of the molecule that it's more responsible for the toxic effect of endotoxin. And it's actually, interestingly, is a part that remains quite constant regardless of the origin of the LPS. All LPS come from, or endotoxins come from gram-negative bacteria, but you may have from E. coli, from Salmonella, from different types of gram-negative bacteria. But this portion, the lipid A, remains quite constant regardless of the initial type of bacteria, of gram-negative bacteria. And it is also the portion responsible for the toxic effect. So what are endotoxins? We've described they're integral component of the outer cell wall. They are naturally released by the gram-negative bacteria when this cell wall it's broken or it's divided. Where are they? Well, they are where the gram-negative bacteria are, which basically is in the gastrointestinal tract as part of the normal microflora of swine. Even on healthy animals, you will have some gram-negative bacteria in equilibrium with other types of bacteria there. And of course, in cases of disease or whatever, they may increase. Because they are in the gastrointestinal tract, they can get excreted through manure. And once they are in the farm, in the pit, that manure, that LPS in manure can get airborne. So then they will be in the air or in the dust. And once they are there, they can be inhaled both by the animals and by the animals. So then they would be also in the upper respiratory tract. So both locations, gastrointestinal tract and upper respiratory tract. When are they, when do we have an endotoxin issue? Even with healthy animals, we may have it, of course, but then also any production that implies any increase of gram-negative bacteria, any changes on microbiota, stress conditions, low immune status, damage in the epithelial wall. For example, when you have other components like mycotoxins or stress, you may have some damage in the integrity of the gastrointestinal wall, and that will increase the absorption of endotoxins into the systemic, into the blood, and then of course they can go to other organs. And of course, when you use antibiotics, you actually kill the gram-negative bacteria, which is good, you control it, but you at the same time, because of the breaking of the cell wall, there is an increased release of endotoxins. So what are the control strategies, that we can take in order to try to mitigate the issue? Obviously, any aspect, any production, any action that results in a reduction of bacterial contamination will help. Of course, less gram-negative bacteria less presence of endotoxins, so any hygiene, any immune status, anything that reduces the bacterial contamination, it will reduce the LPS contamination. There's been some research on vaccination also to try to vaccinate either animals or humans to control it. Of course, that will apply only to the LPS that it's present in the blood system, not in the gastrointestinal wall. Of course, antibodies will be circulating. It's very expensive. There are some good results, but it's very expensive. Then also, normally endotoxins, what they trigger is an inflammation process, so and there is the immune system is actually involved in the reaction that occurs after there is an endotoxin issue. So the use of immune modulators to try to compensate this immune reaction have been also tested, again, with some mixed results, but it's actually also a quite expensive method. And of course, lately, some products, in our case with Protect 8+, we have tested the product basically with the same mechanism of action that we use to control mycotoxins. We use it as a binder, where the product is ingested by the animals. The main area where the gram-negative bacteria are present is in the gastrointestinal tract. So the idea is that the product binds to the endotoxin, stops it from binding to the receptor that triggers the inflammation reaction, and then the whole bound molecule of LPS plus binder gets excreted, because this whole complex is very big. The LPS does not go airborne or anything, so you basically stop the action of LPS. Same kind of mechanism of action, same approach that with mycotoxin mitigation. This is a summary of what happens, with you have a LPS present. Of course, you have the gram-negative bacteria, E. coli, naturally present in the gastrointestinal tract. Some of the white blood cells, the macrophages, may detect, the gram-negative bacteria. They destroy it. When they destroy it, they release the endotoxin. Once this endotoxin is released, it can bound to receptors, that are present in the macrophages. And after the endotoxin gets bound to the receptor, basically it triggers an inflammation response. That is the end result of the endotoxin action, an inflammation response that can either be already at the local epithelium of the gastrointestinal tract, or if they are absorbed and they go into the blood system and they get distributed into other organs. Of course, this inflammation can occur also in other organs. This inflammation, it's produced through basically an increase in production of inflammatory cytokines. So the inflammation process is mediated by inflammatory cytokines. And of course, this same action will be exactly the same if instead of the macrophages we had antibiotics. If we have antibiotics acting against the gram-negative bacteria, then the bacteria will be killed, the LPS will be released, and the same triggering of the inflammation process will occur after the use of the antibiotics. Some of the, with this in mind, and trying to use, like I said, the same approach to bind the endotoxins, with our product, we had some initial data with in vitro. If you're familiar with mycotoxin binding, you will see that we follow the same approach. We basically have an in vitro test at 2 different pHs. The idea is the product binds the endotoxin at the initial pH, in this case 5.5 of pH, which is normally the initial pH of the upper intestine in swine. And then the idea is that once the product binds the endotoxin, it should keep it bound regardless of the change of pH that occurs through the normal transit of food through the gastrointestinal tract. So we see here, we tested the product at 1 or half a kilo or 1 kilo or 2 pounds or 1 pound per ton. In this case, we tested initially at around 40 endotoxin units. The problem, the main problem with endotoxins is there is really no reference value in the literature on what to, on what levels to test. So we tested at a relatively low values. As you can see here, the initial binding is very good, or 90%, 99%. And also the desorption, once the product is capable of binding the endotoxin, it does not release it. So even with the change of pH, there is absolutely no release whatsoever. So the end efficacy rate is, efficacy of binding is very good. We tested this at the normal commercial dosages with a relatively low contamination of endotoxins. We repeated the in vitro testing basically under more difficult conditions, namely the two different LPS concentration, 5,000 and 100,000, which are extremely high, and at different time points. And even at the worst conditions, at the most difficult, which will be the shortest time, with the highest concentration of endotoxin, the 100,000, with the lowest dosage of the product, the half a kilo or 1 pound per ton, we already obtain a 90% binding capacity, so very good one. The moment we go to a little bit better conditions for the product, either higher dosage of the product or longer time to act, or lower contamination, we are already achieving 95, almost 100%. So in vitro testing, again, very good results. But of course, in vitro, as always, same as mycotoxins, it should be taken only as an indication, not as a proof that the product is working. The proof comes from the in vivo testing. So for that, we use a model that is used in the University of Ghent in Belgium, in the European Union, that is used to test different conditions, different products or conditions in the gastrointestinal tract. The model basically consists, we take a few piglets, we sedate them, we anesthetize them, and then we ligate different sections of the intestine. So each one of these sections will be the experimental unit. They are isolated. So, whatever occurs in each one of them, it does not transfer to the other ones. And we inject whatever treatments we do in each one of these loops that we call. And after a couple of hours, we take a biopsy of each one of the sections, and we test of whatever end parameters we want to test. So this is the model we use to test our product, and these are the treatments that we use on both piglets. Each one of the piglets, of course, has several of these loops. So we tested all treatments, pretty much the first 3 treatments we tested in each one of the piglets, and at least in 3 different loops in each one of the piglets. So the treatments were controlled without any LPS, very high dosage of LPS, 200,000, because we had done a previous test and we saw that that was the dosage that the contamination we needed from LPS to trigger a response, in this case, to use the model. Of course, the LPS plus the product, at a 0.3% inclusion rate. That is, we did in both piglets, and then we included one just with the product to see if there was any issues with just the product, any toxicity, anything, And based on the results also of the initial test that we did, we measured these 3 inflammatory cytokines. In an initial test, we had tested for different ones. We saw that these ones were the ones mostly affected when there was a LPS present. So that's the ones that we use for the test with the product. These are the results. As we see here, we have the 2 different piglets. These are the different cytokines here at the bottom. If you notice, this is, the saline solution, the one in blue without any LPS, on gray with the LPS, and the yellow is the LPS plus Protect A. And as you can see on both piglets, there is normally when you have the LPS, there is an increase on each one of the cytokines. And in piglet 2, it was even more clear. It was a clear increase every time that we had the LPS. And then once we have the binder, we go, actually in many cases lower actually than the initial control, than the one without LPS. So clearly there is a response of using in each one of the 3 inflammatory cytokines in both of the piglets. We have a clear reduction of the production of each one of the inflammation cytokines once we use the product. When we compare only in the initial piglet, when we compare only the product by itself, as you can see here, in one case we had higher than the control, in another one very, much lower, and another one very similar, meaning basically that there is no issue with the product by itself. It was not triggering any response or anything. So the product by itself, it didn't cause any problems. Okay, but a clear effect on the production of inflammatory cytokines when the Protect A was included together with the LPS. So with that, of course, we had proved that the product was working in vitro, ex vivo also. So that was great. But of course, the end result that we want, what we want to really demonstrate is that the fact that the product is capable of binding endotoxins, that results in an economic advantage. Obviously, at the end of the day, what we want is to use the product to give an economic advantage to the farmer when they use it. Okay, so for that we did different testings of the product under commercial and research farms in swine to try to see if we could see an advantage of the use of the product. We had an initial 3 trials in the Netherlands. The overall layout of the trial was very similar. We use it at post-weaning, basically because we try to choose a situation in swine production where you have an issue with E. coli, for example, with gram-negative bacteria. Normally, of course, post-weaning diarrhea is a pretty common situation, even on healthy farms. So that's where, we thought that there would be a challenge there. It's a situation where there is a challenge with LPS, with endotoxins. So we used it there. And the layout was basically right after weaning, we use an initial post-weaning diet and then another starter diet. In this case, it was the first 2 weeks and then the other almost 3 weeks for a second diet. Negative control compared to, we had 3 different trials, 1 or 2 pounds per ton of Protect 8 Plus. And the results were all very promising. We had 3 trials. In the first 2 trials, we tested at 1 ton, 1 pound per ton or 2 pounds per ton, half a kilo or 1 kilo per ton of dosage. And we basically, in both cases, used through the whole experiment. And we had an increase in performance in average daily gain and in feed intake. There was a dosage response. In the initial trial, we had only the 1 pound per ton. And when we increased it to 2 pounds per ton, we had double from 2% to 5% increase in feed intake and increase in average daily gain. So a dose response there. And then in the last experiment, we actually tested at the higher dosage, at the 2 pounds per ton, the 1 kilo per ton, but we only use it in the first diet, in the first 2 weeks of the experiment. And in the second diet, both treatments were without the product. Okay, and even then, we achieved almost the same results that with the previous experiment. So we get almost the same increase by just using the product at the initial post-weaning diet. Now, all these results were very promising, but they were not statistically significant. So we repeated the experiment because we wanted to be able to see if we could actually show statistically significant results. So we repeated the trial recently, same layout. We did it in 2 rounds to have greater number of animals. Okay, and this again the same layout post-weaning. Day 0 is the first day after weaning. In this case, the first diet was for 3 weeks, and then up till day 48 post-weaning. And again, negative control. And in this case, we use the recommended dosage of 2 pounds per ton of the product. Okay, and as you can see, when we put together both results, average daily average weight at the end of the experiment, we had a statistically significant increase of over 1 kilo. That actually was the result of an increase during the phase 2 of the trial. During the second portion of the trial, that's where we actually achieved the difference in growth. In the initial phase, there was an increase, but it was not significant. And then also feed conversion. In this case, we actually had an overall statistically improvement of feed conversion, but in this case, it came from both diets. But the first diet and the second diet, each one of them had an increase. An increase in better feed conversion rate that, of course, resulted in an overall improvement. Okay, this actually makes sense. There was no difference in feed intake, which would make sense in this if you think that what the product is doing is basically improving the gastrointestinal, limiting the inflammation coming from LPS. So there is a better absorption of nutrients and better use of those nutrients for growth. Okay. So we repeated also in China. We repeated under commercial Chinese conditions. Same layout. 2 weeks post weaning, and then 30 more days. Phase 2 diets. Again, at 2 pounds per ton inclusion rate of the product. And as you can see here, what we got here was basically a statistically significant also improvement in daily gain that actually resulted about the over 1 kilo also increased in body weight. In this case, again, the increase was obtained, statistically significant, obtained during the second phase of the trial. You know, with the second diet, that's where we got it. In the first one, there was a numerical increase, but the statistically significant improvement was in the second portion of the trial that resulted in an overall statistically significant improve in growth when the product was used at the 2 pounds per ton inclusion rate. Okay, so in summary, you know, we explain a little bit what are endotoxins. They are an integral component of the gram-negative bacterial cell wall. Why there is always some pressure of endotoxins, even in healthy animals and in good condition, you know, farms. You still have, of course, part of the naturally occurring balanced microflora. You will have, of course, some gram-negative bacteria. There are many ways to mitigate endotoxin. One of them is the endotoxin binders and protect A+ has shown, proven, you know, in vitro, in vivo, and then performance-related improvement because of its capacity to bind, you know, endotoxins. With that concludes my presentations, and my colleague now will be more than glad to entertain any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Josep Garcia. Again, for our audience, that's Dr. Josep Garcia. We currently have on Ethan Gross, who's going to answer the questions for us. Ethan, the first question that we have is, were these pigs from a high health herd? Were they health challenged, particularly in those 3 live animal studies that he presented?
Yeah, so great question. No, they were not. Those were pigs that were freshly weaned, and they both came, all those groups came from relatively healthy herds. No known challenges and no experimental challenges. So the interesting thing for us was, even with natural LPS challenges simply from the stress of weaning the animal, we were still able to have a great benefit on reducing them and seeing a performance increase. Theoretically, I would think if we challenge them and the non-challenged pigs were receiving the product and the other ones were not, they would see a greater increase in performance due to mitigating, you know, the higher load of LPS challenge.
Mm-hmm. Very good. We have 2 questions. I'm going to try to tie them together a little bit. Is where do you see this technology going to in the future? And basically from that, what recommendation would you make to a producer that needs to include this in their diet?
Yeah, so as far as where this is going in the future, I think the future is now. We see a lot of challenges with E. coli and other things in our industry today, right? If you remember back to the beginning of the presentation, LPS come from these gram-negative bacteria, right? So if we're constantly having them, you know, find me a farm that doesn't have bacterial challenges, right? They're always going to be there. So I think finding a problem that's consistently there and being able to remove it, and then seeing, even the case of healthy animals, having a performance increase, I think that technology will continue to catch on and allow these animals to naturally stay healthier and stay ahead of the curve. For our recommended usage for now, we put it into any nursery diets. That's the biggest one. You know, we look at the LPS, going to the nursery, getting those pigs cleaned up, and seeing, you know, some really, really nice feedbacks from the field when we have, you know, in a E. coli challenge, a hemolytic E. coli challenge, or any other gram-negative bacterial challenge, reducing death, loss, and mortality, and really seeing a good return for the producer with the product.
Great. Thank you, Ethan, so much. We have multiple questions that we know we didn't get to. We will be sending those to you in an email, both
Great.
to you and Dr. Josep Garcia, and you both can work on answering those. So again, that was Ethan and Josep from Essential Ag Solutions. Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much.